It does. I think what you have there is relevant. I think, a lot of what you have there was already in process, right? The flexibility, the work from home,
Mhm.
companies having to adjust to, teleworking, remote solutions, things like telehealth, all of the above.
Mhm.
And then we got slammed with COVID-19, right? And that
Right.
just, what that's going to do is accelerate. It already has, right? It's forced all of these companies to quickly adjust to like thousands and thousands of employees working from home in order to continue to keep their businesses going, right? So it's speeding up that transformation. And then if you look at things like cloud, regardless of the major cloud provider, right? You can pick any one. It's forced companies to lean on cloud more and more if they had cloud, and if they didn't have cloud, start looking at cloud, and also if they have a small footprint in cloud, start to add more there, because it becomes more critical to have a remote infrastructure and environment and be able to scale that, right? You go from, I don't know, a small percentage of your workforce working from home to everybody has to work from home. Think of the load that added to, infrastructure. And I know there are some organizations that when we went through that period of everyone had to go work from home, some organizations really struggled with, things like VPN, things like, remoting into servers. And if you still have physical servers where someone has to show up at a data center, oh man, right? But if you're in cloud, you just expand. And things like, I don't want to turn this into a commercial for Microsoft, but if you have, like Office 365, a lot of the tooling, or even G Suite, right? A lot of the tooling, you can use that stuff without VPN. And that's the future. It's been here, but this whole COVID-19 thing is accelerating that. And then if I look at where my kids are today in school, they're already doing a lot of that, right? They're using like Google Apps, they're using iPads, they're doing things remote. You think about the kids having to move to e-learning. Not all schools, but some schools were prepared for it because they had the kids already working on technology platforms. Now the rest of the world, the rest of the school system needs to catch up, and this is accelerating that, right? And there's a whole group of kids out there and families that weren't ready for this and don't have things like computers or even stable internet. And those are some of the things that we need to make sure, if we're in this industry, we're pushing for more of that so everyone has equal access to technology.
Yeah. So, Steve, for me, I see that experience for children every single day. My wife is in public schools. There's this great digital divide where
Yeah.
kids in the Minneapolis public schools, there's a certain number of them, a large number of them, that don't have access to the internet or don't have devices so they can even participate in some of this e-learning opportunities. And one of the discussion considerations or discussion topics is having kids who are not at level be the kids who return to school, and those schools that, or those kids that are at level or are performing well would continue with the e-learning type experience. So yeah, that speaks very directly to what we're seeing on the ground here too.
Wouldn't that, having the kids that that have the technology and are able to do the e-learning continue to do the e-learning, and the kids that don't have them return to the schools, wouldn't that continue to expand the gap? I mean, wouldn't we want to look at the kids that don't have the tech, don't have the computers, maybe not the stable internet connections?
Right.
Wouldn't it be better to get those kids up to speed to start to
Yeah.
close that gap?
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. I won't speak for the Minneapolis public schools, but I think the challenges that they found were a couple of things. One, they just didn't have the hardware to distribute to every single kid that needed it. And then secondly, if these internet connections are slow, is there a solution where they can improve those internet connections? And to try and do something by August, maybe they recognize that that's a heavy lift to get done by August. So I think it was just an idea. I'm not sure it's a policy yet, but it speaks to your issue, right? The digital divide is a real problem out there.
And that's going to proliferate that divide. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and I'll just chime in. So I'm more on the hardware side, right? So, my engineering degree is on computer engineering. I've been in data communication for a lot of years, and what goes into a lot of this when we talk about, the digital divide, or even, home learning or e-learning or any of those things, right, is simply everyone needs a router, right, at their home. That's as simple as it gets. And then I think that if you were to do some of the assessments around this, but what happens is that it's the language, right? And I think, we as tech people, we can look at this from our side and we see this and go, they need a router, they need, this, they need that, at their house, and a lot of that stuff, right? And a lot of this is the disconnect is that, for Minneapolis public schools and other school systems across the country, they've never done internet service providing, right? They've never done internet service purchasing, right? And they've never worked with the large scale Cisco's or the Microsofts and others, to do some of this real tie-in around collaboration and distribution of data and being able to look in and out, right? And so what you find is that, the kids are up to speed because they're using a lot of the PDAs, cell phones and iPads and, things like that. So they can understand, how to use the technology, but the link, right, between the school and the home, and also Steve brought up something that was really critical, even to the jobs, homes, and is your technology up to speed, right? To be able to do any of the Microsoft 365 at home, or to do any of the things that you want to do as far as communication in your homes. And that's really critical from a start. Now imagine everyone online if Comcast was in your area, right? And let's just say the federal government decided, let's spend $20 million and put a router in every home, right? Which is not that expensive, right? To put a router in everyone's home to start the communication, right? And then from there, with the router being in everyone's home, why don't we start a national education program, right? Simply, okay, what is a router? What does it mean? We really need to get our country up to speed, not on what an app is, right? But really what it is about your technology that's important to you at home. And especially if we're moving to this new thing of, social distancing and, all this media communication. That we have to educate our country somehow on how to move to that.
Yeah, I think you're right on that, Fred, and right to recognize it's going to take time for people who have never played in this arena before. I think there was an interesting thing I read on Denmark yesterday where they started to send kids back, and the kids they sent back were the youngest ones. And what they acknowledged was that for the high school students, it's not as big of a leap. But when my wife is working with K through 2 second grade, the idea of working on a device even is a challenge. And then you complicate that with parents who may be in the hospitality or the food industry and both have lost jobs, and they're pulling their hair out. So I think there's some real big challenges there that it's easy to see the solution, but how to to get there with the government organization, it could take some time. So.
Yeah, but you know, these are unprecedented times, right? Who would have thought we would have all been locked in, right? Quarantined or with stay-at-home orders. I mean, one of the most common traits that is expected in the future in this post-COVID type of scenario is innovation and creativity. Right. And just to Fred's point, we got to remember that electricity really wasn't started in mass until the 1880s.
Right.
It wasn't until after most of my grandmother's time, you know, the people born in the 20s, I think it was 1925 when half of the Americans had electricity. Now, keep in mind, there's electricity everywhere. It's a utility. And I think, you know, joining that movement, Fred, or starting a movement to create network as a utility versus, you know, putting a router in everybody's home. You should be able to plug right into it if this is what our future exactly is going to look like, right? It goes from commercial network to utility-based network, and maybe you do have providers and whatnot. That's a great, but then those jobs that open up there, right? We had Shakaya Richmond on, and she talked about, you know, some guy shows up in a truck pulling cable, some guy or gal, and you just think, you know, are they even educated? Do they have technology? Well, they're probably some of the most sophisticated technology people as it relates to routers and switches and data transfer, right? And also the engineering concepts of electrical transduction or whatever the terms are, loss and all that. And so there's a whole world of new jobs and opportunities opening up for these young students that can take their creativity and imagination just with that alone, Fred, right? And getting prepared for the workforce. Speaking of network, one of the other things, Mike, I think you pointed out, or in the earlier conversation, was like going to the cloud, right? And so hardware, where do these things reside at? And quite coincidentally, literally, we just had Steve on last Thursday, and he talked about that very topic. But how do you still see transforming industry? Do you see some type of cloud transformation in a way as it leads to either AI or data? Or Steve, do you have any, Steve or Fred, Fred, you deal with data in terms of transformation of data, transferring data, and you depend on those heavy duty backbones, right? Where Steve designs and builds out cloud infrastructure, transforming the cloud. So maybe if you guys could talk about that topic.
I'll let Steve go first because he's the expert. Then I'll follow up on Steve.
Yeah, I think Dr. Wulf, you know, when you speak in the context of cloud, you still need connectivity to it. So what that has done has made the network, right, the infrastructure to get to the cloud, all that more critical.
Mm-hmm.
So when you speak about those jobs, right, of those folks that know networking, that know the communication side of things, those are as critical to the success of cloud as having a cloud, right? If you can't connect to it or the reliability is not there, then, you know, you're not going to utilize the cloud, right? So that's absolutely critical. And we live in a global world at this point, right? Where the person you're working with may not even be in your time zone. They may be on the other side of the world, or they might be down the street. And in regards to COVID-19, you think about that, you know, with folks working from home, that just expands even more.
So adding to that, Steve, and is, you know, COVID-19 just, all it did was exposed what we should have been doing years ago, right? And I can just give you guys a great example is that for Minneapolis, just the city itself, I sit on the Minnesota High Tech Association governance board. And so what we do is when things go in the legislature, we look at a lot of the bills that, you know, come up, and we're also part of the voting recommendation arm for a lot of the bills that come up as well. And so broadband was one. It was a huge bill that came up maybe 5 years ago. And the pushback was that one of the service delivery companies was trying to build out 5G in Minneapolis, and they were trying to increase the bandwidth, throughout Minneapolis. And there was a huge pushback from the community and others about, cancer. This is going to uproot some things that they were dealing with physically, right? And so there was a big push against the bill to move forward because people couldn't see the advantage of having now internet access or network access in their communities. And so what happened is that a lot of those communities got excluded, and what they did is they rerouted the networks to other places within Minneapolis, right? And so now you have some kids who have 5G and have network infrastructure that's built out, and some kids who don't, right? Because of this, and I think that we as humans walking around will have to do a little bit more demanding of reality around our infrastructure, because we are going to be moving to more of an extended communication type, and it's going to be happening for real. And just to give you guys a great example, let's take sports, right? When I get off this call at 12:30, we're going to be on a call, and Steve, this is all about the cloud. Lindsay, Michael, this is all about the cloud. But what's happening is that people are struggling trying to get people back into the stadiums, right? Well, when you think about the technology and what we're doing here from a Zoom standpoint, right, we're interacting, right? And what has happened is that people have been pushing out, communication, like you've seen a lot of the concerts and all of that stuff, but you don't get the feedback, right, from the crowd or the people or your audience, right? So a big thing right now is to move to virtual reality during the sports games. So you and I, all of us, could then log in, right? And just as we are participating on Zoom, whoever is making the most noise gets the most visual, on the screen inside the stadium. And what a sports person can do, or a football player, soccer, whatever. They can have a visiting camera, right? And they can have a home team camera, right? So when you score, right, you run to your home team camera and go, you point at it and everybody goes, wah! And you can hear it all over the screen, right? But you're eliminating that touch. You're eliminating all the people having to go elbow to elbow, but we're getting used to that now, right? Because we're moving from the old steel mills. And I told somebody this the other day as we're talking through this, the Roman, Colosseum. Have you ever been to the Roman Colosseum in Italy?
Yeah, I watch Gladiator over and over all the time.
I've actually been there, and it's amazing.
Yeah, and you know what? It's done. It's a ruin, right? What we're looking at now, guys, we got to really lock into that. We're moving into something that's going to be totally new in this world, and all the jobs that are going to be available. I'm telling you, if we have to take advantage of data communication, software understand. All those jobs are going to open up because they're going to be so needed, because brick and mortar is going to start to grow daisies and flowers and stuff like that, because that's not going to be so important as it is how we're communicating now, right?
Yeah, you bring up some really a really fascinating use case scenario, and if you think about that, it's really hard for folks to wrap their mind around, okay, sports in the future, think of NBA games or NFL games, and you may not actually go to the stadium. What does that look like, right? You're throwing out ideas here, and it's going to take creative individuals to really make that experience an awesome experience that customers would want to pay for, right? And so when you think about jobs of the future, it's going to take people that are creative, that know technology, that can come up with ideas and new ways to do things. You brought up like virtual reality. Well, you know, a lot of the tech vendors have been building these like VR headsets and these, you know, augmented reality. And I know Google has like the glasses thing. And, you know, a few years ago, that stuff was, you know, why would anyone really use it? But now when you start to think about those things, right, okay, maybe this could play in this scenario. So we will need people and talent to develop on those things, make them better from a software perspective, from a hardware perspective. You know, you think about like VR headsets, if they become widespread, you know, customers are going to want those things to look trendy. They're going to want them to be small, sleek, easy to use. You know, you don't want this big thing, you know, on your head as you're walking around. You might be watching a sports game or enjoying a TV show or participating in a meeting. And so a lot of the jobs are going to be in those areas, and not just on the software side, the hardware engineering side and the communication side is needed as well. But there's a whole world that's opening up right now.
I want to add in on that, Steve, is that, so, you know, I like to go all the way from the basic stuff all the way to the high tech end of it. But, you know, I look at how my two boys, but my youngest son, when cell phones first came out, right? I believe, except Steve for sure, Lindsay, probably don't remember when pagers were the hot thing.
Oh my God.
I remember pagers.
Okay, so Steve.
It was a beeper. Hey, it was a beeper.
Well, let's talk about those headsets and the work in the industry, even with gamers, right? You have, if you're creative and artistic and you have a knack for tech, you could make ergonomically, you know, aesthetically looking things, right, in wraps. But what about just the day-to-day repair, right? And what about the day-to-day cleaning and you know, COVID transfer and used market and all that for this stuff, right? There's a whole bunch of micro businesses that could spur out of this if our young people had a little bit of electrical engineering, a little bit of, you know, coding, and they can start to jump into some of those faster evolving bootleg hustle kind of jobs as well as preparing themselves for the high tech industry, right? And to support business. But that's how the Geek Squad came out, right? Just like me, I got tired of fixing people's computers. Well, I'm not Geek Squad, but I can see how it evolved. It was like, hey, let's just make money, and just instead of giving it away for free because you know how to boot it up, let's start charging $100 a PC, and they're a huge market, as well as retail, right? So let's talk about the delivery of retail. That's going to be transformed tremendously, and it's growing now, right? So we have to be prepared not only for unprecedented times, but like a complete paradigm shift. What if we all have to stay inside, and I won't say forever, but for like a long time? The healthcare industry and the technology behind staying safe. Look at your home, battery backup, infrastructure. It's literally, you could almost throw a dart at anything in technology and land on it. So I don't know, Mike, did you not do research and found like the top 10 industries that would be impacted or something around that before we got started?
I sure did, Mike. And I'm trying to keep up with you guys' conversation, which is clearly in front of where I started at.
It's recorded. You can replay it 5 times.
Well, that's good to know. One of the things for me that I found very interesting was the driver of all of this. And if I could ask the question of how you guys see this concept, which I heard about maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, the Internet of Things, the idea of how everything's connected now as being the driver for some of the ideas that you guys are talking about, right? I know that may be too basic and takes us back further than you guys need to go, but I think it can be helpful for some of us to understand what's driving all of this, right?
So I'll jump in there really quick first. There's the Zoom meeting. So the Internet of Things is still very relevant, and that part of the technology market is still young. And so there's still a lot of opportunity for growth and still a lot of maturity that can happen. But when you think about the Internet of Things, there's a ton of possibilities there. And we're living with the Internet of Things right now. I mean, this is a Fitbit. right? This is collecting data. It's storing the data somewhere. I can access it on an app or a website. And being able to collect data just like I can around a Fitbit, you know, as I'm doing things. Think about agriculture. You know, there's IoT for cows, and you would think like, why would I want to put a device on my cattle, right? Well, you can track the entire life cycle of a cow, like what it eats, is it healthy, is it sick? If it's sick, I need to take it to a vet, right? Where it is at any given time, what its weight is, all this data, you're ingesting all of this data, and IoT has made that a reality. And then all of that data goes somewhere, right? So that typically flows into cloud, but there needs to be data scientists and folks that know how to do the analytics to make the data useful. Another example are trash cans. And again, you would think, why would I need IoT on trash cans? Why would I need smart trash cans, right? Well, there's a city on the East Coast in the US that did like a proof of concept. And what they figured out is through IoT on the trash cans, they could measure when the trash cans were near full. And then they would send out a truck to go empty that trash can. And what it did was it reduced the cost. So instead of having trucks go out, you know, on a regular schedule, they would just send them out when they're needed. So if you think about the future in IoT and what that's going to do, there are possibilities that haven't even been thought of yet.
Right. And it's getting deeper too. You know, so you made a statement about the data scientists, right? And that goes back to what we said back in, I don't know, I started college in 1975, and we still had this slogan, and it was called garbage in, garbage out, right? And the way that it works, and a lot of times, you know, we have to really slow down now as humans and start thinking about what we're doing around technology, right? Because garbage in, garbage out can mean, you know, you think that this is the best route to go, but without a data scientist or someone really actually giving you feedback on what you're thinking about how you're going to utilize the data within your company or your home or whatever, you really need to have a way of architecting that so that you get out of the system what you put in, right? And a lot of people put a lot of data in systems that they can't get out. And that keeps, you know, a company like ours and Microsoft and others, you know, in business. But I think moving forward from where you just talked about, Michael, you know, 5 years ago, and people talking about, you know, the Internet of Things, right now you see a lot of apps and a lot of those that are made it very easy for humans to interact, right, with the apps online, right? Because that's, you know, you don't have to open up Microsoft Word and type anything. You can just use your app, and, you know, you're communicating on, you know, Instagram, and, you know, you're doing all these things that you don't really realize that you're advanced communicating, right? But you're just looking at it as a phone. And when you think about the big data aspect of this and what's in the cloud, imagine every person who's taken photos or videos, right? Those things are going up to the cloud, right? But once you apply the right methodology to what's happening with the technology, I think people can start to understand it a lot more, and then they can appreciate what's happening on the backside of the data scientists, the engineers, and, you know, they can then start to understand. And what we teach our kids in the Black Data Processing Associates, you know, it's from the classroom to the boardroom, right? And it's about them learning, you know, the technology and all the other aspects around technology to apply it appropriately. Not that everything matters, right? Because everything don't matter. And so I think there's just this whole new world that's going to open up that has been extremely afraid for people to touch, right? Because when I tell people I'm an engineer or whatever, they're like, what? I'm like, really? I mean, I went to school just like you would for art or, you know, anything else, right? I mean, it's a college process. And I think people lose, you know, that effect that it's a college process.
Right. Thanks for sharing, Fred. Can I ask you guys a question about cybersecurity? I'm going to jump over here. Would you agree that cybersecurity is a trend? I noticed programs in this field, the idea that people have a back door to your information, does that create that opportunity for others to exploit that? I'm curious about cloud security and what you guys think about that.
Well, you have cloud security, which I'm not going to jump in. I just want to interject something. You have cloud security, but you also have, in addition to that, you might have, Steve mentioned last Thursday about telemedicine, right? So you might have HIPAA, health, very deep privacy. Let's not just talk about the financial gains or rewards that a theft can happen through cyber criminals, right? But just even innocuous data like Steve's Fitbit. What if somebody was able to hack the Fitbit information, or even of those cows, right? Let's go even talk about something bizarre that city people don't talk about. What if somebody was able to hack that Holstein's Fitbit, right, or embedded chip, and was able, let's say it was a competing farm mega lord, right? They could send an electronic shock or some unknown future wave into the cow and kill off the cow if it's placed on a vein, right? I mean, we could talk about a whole bunch of crazy stuff, but that isn't too far-fetched, right? But in the world of telemedicine, you have the financial services, you have healthcare, you have the major vertical industries that all have to be prepared for this. And I guess one of my biggest fears is you get a lot of people that can write code, and then they sell these apps, and you're giving away their data by clicking the yes, I accept these terms, right? So today we're used to giving away our privacy, right? So cybersecurity, in addition to the legal aspects of that, I think there's even technical law, right? People that want to defend us that have to be involved in this as well. So I just wanted to set that baseline because we have a data expert and a cloud expert. So tell us about cybersecurity.
So our company, we do a lot of data integration, data transformation. We probably do about 40 million data transactions a month with our technology. With a lot of your larger retail box companies, we do a lot of their what we call electronic data interchange, EDI. We do a lot of their, like for Sony worldwide, we handle all of their disparate data communication, so, just things like that, right? And so we have about 8 levels of security, within our company, right? And that's, because we have 10 engineers on staff who handles that for us, right? Like, I wouldn't know, I used to know all of this stuff, like, I used to know when barracudas were out, and, I used to know all of that stuff, right? But I'm sure they're way beyond that now, right? Because our engineers are handling it. But I want to go back to a word that you used, Michael, and it's called preparedness, right? And preparedness is what we've actually put on the back burner, right? In a lot of these major corporations, companies, stuff like that. They all have preparedness plans, right? For situations like COVID-19, right? And I guarantee you those things are probably 20 years old. You can get real dust off of them, right?
Yeah.
And so now that it's heightened, and when you come back to, around the security and concerns about it and things of that nature, because people haven't followed their preparedness plans, and that is educating their employees, everyone about security and how serious security is. Like, we do what we call pen tests at my company, which is, we hire an outside firm, right? We don't know when they're going to come in, but they try to penetrate our door. They try to penetrate our office by getting past the person at the front desk. I mean, we do all of these different tests to make sure that we send back to the government or whoever we're doing business with that we've done these security tests. So cybersecurity, when it gets right down to it, to individuals at home or individuals who now are exposed to using their technology at home, holy smoly, we're probably 15 years behind, right? As far as, and on the serious side, leaving open doors for people to get into our home systems. And a lot of the, Steve, I don't know if you agree with this or not, but a lot of the companies that have now let their employees go home now have all of these doors wide open, right, to their infrastructure for people to try to crack their system code to get all of their employee data or all their financial data or all of that. So imagine the quickness and how fast people had to put in these mechanisms, right? Or new password systems or all this new systems just to keep up with what's transitioning now. And the thieves and the guys, like, they had a field day this year. For the last 6 months, they've had a field day, right? Of stealing money and passwords and all of that stuff. And I'll turn it over to Steve.
Yeah, all great points there. So I'll start off with saying I'm not a security expert, and that really is a specialty.
Yes.
I have a really good friend of mine who is a security specialist, and there's a lot to keep up with just in the security space alone. Now, with that being said, security is also the responsibility of everyone.
Mm-hmm.
From you securing your stuff personally to securing anything that you're using for a company, securing customers, data and systems. Like, security is the responsibility of everyone. And in the world of cloud, the major vendors have been pouring just tons of money into security. I mean, let's just take a step back and imagine what kind of day, the CEO of Google or Microsoft or Amazon or AWS would have if their cloud was hacked, right? And thousands of customers' data, our company's data, was out there. I mean, that would be a cloud business killer. I don't know if a major cloud provider could recover from a major security breach.
Right.
If you think about that, that's almost as important as having the latest and greatest cloud capabilities itself. So these cloud providers are pouring a ton of money into security to ensure that, once your stuff is on their cloud, it's as secure as possible. Now, with that being said, nothing is 100% secure either. If it's there, it's hackable, right? Oh, yeah. It just matters if the person or the team or whatever, the government that's trying to hack it, has enough time and money to get in. So in regards to security too on the cloud, there's different layers, right? So there's securing, communication, securing data at transit, securing data at rest, securing on the development side. So when we talk about DevOps teams, there's something called DevSecOps, and there's a movement known as shifting security left. So when you go to develop an application or a solution, bring security in. It should be top of mind for everyone. When you're developing things, you should never have credentials in code. Shouldn't be there. You should be using a vault. And there's enough vault solutions out there, from open source companies to cloud providers, that you just shouldn't have it in the code, right? And then when we talk about networking, zero trust security, when we talk about microservices, and this might be diving a little deep here, but if you have a microservices based architecture, we want to put in something called a service mesh. And with that service mesh, we can have zero trust security from day one, from the gate. And we can make sure that we can control, even internally, what services can talk to what services, and we can see that and we can shut that off, right? And that's enabled through some of these newer technologies such as service mesh, right? So even that internal communication, and there's there's new ways of securing your traffic and your communications, because we exist in a software-defined data center world now, software-defined networking, right? Things that didn't exist in the past. And then when you talk about securing, users working from home, that's a whole nother ball game, right? VPNs, you have to secure that. If they're connecting to, Microsoft 365, that stuff needs to be secured. So we have stuff like rights management services, right? So if we send out a document, we're securing that document. So now, no matter if that document lives on a user's computer, or they copy it to a USB drive and someone steals that, and they're trying to get in that drive, that security is wrapped around that document. Wherever that travels, that security is wrapped around that. So you have to change your mindset about security from the legacy way of thinking and start to think about it in a different way. But we could probably spend the whole time, talking about security, and I'll wrap it up there on that note.
Well, I mean, the key thing that you all have stated was that the degrees, the certifications in the realm of cybersecurity, if you will, to put a wrapper on that, that's a big area. It's also expanding and exploding, right? And the need is growing greater. Hardware, which I think, Steve, you can concur about cloud. We always talk about coding. Everybody can jump up with a free coding class or something like that. But the reality of it is there is going to be and still will be a high demand for, local, regional, global data centers, and even hardware at the consumer retail end, right? And then we talked about data science, right there, like, Minnesota State, for example, has a huge data science degree as well as a cyber range. And so the realm of data certifications and data analytics, and just even if you look at it from the reporting end, there's a whole spectrum of jobs that are available there, from protecting the data to hosting the data, or capturing it and collecting it and storing it, to reporting on it in many, many different ways. That's explosive. And then, of course, coding. And one of the words that Fred started evangelizing about 5 years ago was the word algorithm, right? The word algorithm alone means a whole lot. It leads you to understanding, machine learning, to artificial intelligence, right? So, for example, a student has a 4-year degree in psychology, right? They come out of school and they can jump into, they understand how the mind works, how the human being works. It's a very legit, very possible way. You could take sociology. What is, yeah. You can take many non-technical degrees and apply them towards technology. So even for our college students that might be watching, or the adults that have these other degrees, there is a transition for you now, for sure, jumping into the world of technology to leverage just those things. So for example, I'm going to shut up here, is like even sociology, right? Or social studies, or you want to be a social worker, right? You get a degree of certification. Well, you have to understand how the human being thinks and how they're going to react to things, right? So that whole future world of artificial intelligence, and my only last commercial is for the Minnesota STEM Partnership, that is exactly why that organization exists, is to take robotics that gives you the mechanical, the engineering, the algorithms, the behaviors, the weight distribution, all those concepts. We take the drone racing because it gives them the first person viewer, the goggles, the virtual reality experience as a young person. And then we supplement it with coding, because at the end of the day, software is going to rule, right? The brains of everything. You might have the physical hardware, but without the software to manage it or be embedded in it, still software plus some type of human computational capabilities is going to matter. So whether you can put artificial anything on any title in the future, but being prepared is what we have to do and start to expose our students to these early opportunities. So Mike, I don't know, we've got a couple of minutes left. Do you have any softballs or any, before we thank these gentlemen and ladies for joining us today?
I wanted to add one thing, Michael, that you just brought up. And I think that, from the young education or educational standpoint, people need to understand as you're moving through this thing that we are changing, right? And that, what you see now will not be what you will get in the future. And what it means is that there will be less privacy because you'll have the Fitbits on your arm. You'll have other communications around your health, right? Because health is going to move online, right? So that now you get better healthcare because more healthcare systems are going to be tied together. And you're going to see a lot of things move to more collaboration than your silos that used to happen. And the silos were created because of revenue, right? And I think now people are looking at human factor, like, okay, revenue used to matter way more than human factor, right? But now human factor actually has outrated it based on COVID. And when it's exposed, for us to know more about what's going on with our bodies, our minds, and our health, and then that rolls over to jobs. And you think about the jobs to support that. So when you got our healthcare system, just like you got the IT area, it has to be illuminated that we're going to need this many people in the next 5 years in the United States to work on the things that we need to get to the next level. And we have to expose that somehow. And what we've done in the past is not expose it, but import it, right? And we've brought people from other countries to take those jobs, right? That now we're going to have to start focusing on to support our own country, right? And build out our own community of people that are in the information technology arena. I'll just say that.
Well, I got one quick question because, I like the humorous side of things. So when I was growing up, there was this concept of Big Brother will be watching you, right? All of the science fiction, the Big Brother and all that. And so even if we took something that's happening today as a federal registry for COVID positive testing, right? They've even invented, and I know that they're doing some of these things maybe in a city in China, I don't know, but I know an American company invented they took facial recognition and infrared and can apply it to somebody and tell if they have a fever or not. And so if one of the symptoms of COVID-19 is that you have a fever, you're not going to get everybody. You're not going to get the people that are carriers, but you might have somebody walking through a crowd with a fever, and then all of a sudden you see a ambulance pull up and drag this person off to the side, right? You can laugh all you want, but this is reality, right? Or your Fitbit correlates to your facial recognition. It's like, oh, we're sending a helicopter. We're going to just a drone and go pick your butt up and lift you up in the air and fly you away somewhere. So, we can fantasize, but I'm just joking.
So Google and another company has already released the COVID testing tracker, right? So that if you're negative or positive and you've been tested, they can track where you are, right? And they can see if you're in a crowd, as a positive person, are you in a crowd exposing others? They got that tracking. It was just released last week.
Yeah, if you're a Google subscriber or they have your phone number. But, let's keep it real, right? Our demographic, burn and churn, get that Boost Mobile, flip it, get the Walmart $9.99 flip phone, flip it, just get rid of it. So, there's also an opportunity culturally that I think that we represent here that a lot of other people will not be able to speak to. And as you know, even with facial recognition, they could identify white males at a significant percentage more than they could African Americans or any other ethnicity, right? So we are the high tech of the cultural melanin society, right? So I think we need to make...
Dr. Wulf, that's why we need more African Americans in tech on these teams, developing these systems, working with AI, so that we can think of those sort of things. Right?
Yep.
How does that apply to us versus just the norm? White males. They're programming that stuff and putting that stuff into AI. Yeah. So we need to be a part of these teams and be a part of, designing these new technologies.
I agree with that.
Absolutely.
And just to kind of tag on to that, right, as what you're saying, there has to be more mechanisms that are wrapped around, who we are. And Hennepin County is now focused on what they call trauma-informed care, but historical trauma-informed care, right? And it's not new, but it's been around for a while. But what's happening is that they now want to capture algorithms, right, around the intake, right? And then produce the metrics around, and what they're assuming is that when a black person comes into Hennepin County and a white person comes into Hennepin County, they get medicated different.
Yeah, yeah.
Like a black person goes home with no medication, a white person goes home with medication, right? And so, and it's all about, you know, our community being informed and trained on dealing with medical situations, and the same thing happens on their side as well. If you look at the data, most of the medical people are either wealthy, they come from a wealthy household because they're doctors or whatever, and they can afford to go to these colleges, right? Or whatever. But what happens is that you're always encountering that trauma when you enter a hospital or in any of those situations. And right now, Hennepin is trying to put metrics or look at metrics around, is this occurring? Is this really happening? But anyway, so that's
interesting.
Yeah.
So Fred and Steve, Mike, I'm gonna, before we wrap up, since we have about 7 to 9 minutes here, 7 to 8 minutes, did we accomplish any of the topics, Mike, that you wanted to cover? Because we never did do an opening. We just dove right into it. And they were a great conversation. Thank you, Steve, for lighting that fire and getting us going. Obviously, we're very passionate. We're all very tech savvy in our own disciplines. And maybe this warrants an additional follow-up open forum in the upcoming few weeks with others. Maybe we pull in a network and a cybersecurity person and do an open forum, right? And maybe invite the BDPAs, the Techities, the Blacks in Technology to an open discussion.
Yeah, Mike, thanks for asking. One of the things I'd like to remind the young professionals out there, the folks that may be in school, maybe haven't started college or even recently completed their degree, is to piggyback on a point that you made, which is there's a lot of skill sets that you can bring to the field of technology. That's one of my takeaways. And so if you're engaged, if you lean in, if you work with some of the professional organizations, especially the African-American or the people of color professional organizations, that may give you some opportunities to learn more about the field and the opportunities that are available. So I'm familiar with NABA, National Association of Black Accountants. I'm familiar with the Black MBA Group. I'm familiar with a lot of those organizations that do professional development activities. And I'd encourage young folks to lean in, engage, to show their interest through some of these organizations that are always going to be supportive of you as you pursue a degree or a profession. So that's it, Mike.
All right, thank you for that, and thank you, everyone. On behalf of Power Up IT, Minnesota STEM Partnership, and the IT Center of Excellence, Dr. Wulf and I would like to give a huge thank you to Michael Wilson for leading our professional development sessions over the last couple of months. And thank you to Fred and Steve for joining us for today's discussion. We will see you back here on Thursday at 11:30 for our last expert talk of the 2019-2020 school year.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.
Yep.
Bye-bye.